Hello and welcome everyone to the Career Propeller channel. It's a pleasure to have you here, and it's a pleasure to welcome Lisa Gills today to this video. Welcome, Lisa. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm very good, thank you.
Good, good. Lisa runs a recruitment business called Wild Squirrel Recruitment, and we'll be talking about that a lot more during this interview. But what we're going to do today is there's sort of three areas that we really want to cover. First, it will be to talk to Lisa about her career, how she sort of got into recruitment. Then we're looking at recruitment as a career in general. So maybe giving some insight into what it's like to work in that industry, what a day looks like for a typical recruiter. And then we want to give you some tips, some hints and tips on how to actually go about getting a role in the recruitment industry. How to actually go about sort of securing yourself a role. So perhaps, Lisa, we can start with asking you about your career, you know, how you got into recruitment in the first place, and how it's led up to you taking the sort of exciting step of starting your own recruitment agency.
Absolutely. Well, like many people out there, I never intended in getting into recruitment. My background is actually book publishing.
Wow.
I actually did a communications degree, marketing, media, psychology degree, and had every intention or ambition in getting into advertising, the world of advertising. That didn't pan out, unfortunately, and so I ended up in book publishing. I spent 7 years working at places like Random House, Guinness World Records, and HarperCollins. And then one unfortunate day, I was sadly made redundant. Went off to see a recruitment agency in book publishing, and they said, "Lisa, have you ever thought about becoming a recruitment consultant?"
Okay.
I looked at them and said, "Oh my goodness, no. Isn't that the same as selling cars or houses?" And actually, I just thought, well, at that moment in time, why not give that a shot? There was no other opportunities that were on the table, if you like, and I thought, well, why not give this a go? They talked to me about the benefits of being a recruiter and the money side of things, and how it would match with my skills and experience, and also, of course, being in the industry that I was recruiting into would help. And I thought, I've got nothing to lose here. I'm going to do this. If it doesn't pan out, then they can get me a job, and happy days. And that was then. And I just moved from book publishing and ended up moving into a broader marketing and creative role within various brands like Microsoft and Disney and Google, and then would have been 6 years ago, I then started out in planning and strategy. So that's the area I'm in now, and I went and set up a freelance desk for a boutique recruitment agency, and haven't done any freelance before, and that was my specialism at the time. And it went on from there, and I just moved to different boutique agencies in marketing and advertising agency space, and then unfortunately being made redundant just recently, took the opportunity to set up Wild Squirrel Recruitment, and and this is where I am now. So it's been interesting, and I've learned an awful lot along the way.
Yes, and it's interesting what you say about sort of almost falling into it, because I was the same. So we've discussed before how, you know, we've both got that sort of recruitment background, and I was in IT sales, and then was just looking for something slightly different, I think, and wasn't, you know, didn't have a burning desire to move into recruitment. And lots of recruiters are the same, aren't they? They say the same thing. I wasn't really looking for that as a career, but I almost sort of fell into it, really. I was looking at a few things at the time, and then I went for an interview and just got on really well with the people, and thought, oh, this is interesting. You know, it could be an interesting sort of career move. And I think you're absolutely right when you say you learn so much, because I always saw it as a big responsibility, you know, because the two,
it is. It really is.
Yeah, the two really big things people do in their lives is you sort of move jobs and buy a house, I think. You mentioned estate agents as well. So But I see it's a real responsibility, because if you're moving, if you're actually doing the headhunting, if you're going out and you're really trying to pull people out of businesses where they might be happy and they're just happily going along, they're not really looking, then you're potentially taking them away from that situation and putting them somewhere else where you think that they would do well and they'd sort of fit in. But as I say, that's, I think, where the responsibility comes in, that you want to be sure that you're giving them a good move. So I think that's often overlooked, and especially from people who are not in the industry. That like you say, that recruiters sort of have this. There's a perception that they're perhaps a bit unscrupulous, and the same for estate agents, and as you say, second-hand car salespeople and that sort of thing, and that's probably mostly untrue. But I think a few people can give a whole industry a bad name. So that's really interesting how you also sort of weren't particularly looking into that industry. So what sort of challenges have you faced since sort of coming into recruitment? What would you say are the main things that people would face in terms of challenge?
Challenges, they're there every day, aren't they? And you'll know that from your time and being a recruiter as well. It's that knockback, those knockbacks that you get, not just from candidates, of course, but from clients, that need to be resilient and to be able to be relatively thick-skinned. So that's definitely a challenge. I think another challenge has to be the organizational side of things, because you can think you're pretty organized, but until you have, I don't know, 10, 15 jobs on the go at one time, that's when you're testing your organization skills. So there are definitely a couple of challenges, and also just being able to sometimes, I think on the spot about things. Maybe you're put in a position you don't necessarily know an answer to. How do you deal with that? How do you think quickly about something?
Yes.
I think I would say sort of the three key challenges, really.
Yes, I think being able to think on your feet, definitely, because I guess you get objections from potential clients when you're doing business development, but you also get them from candidates. People sort of you're phoning someone up and I guess trying to persuade them that it might be something worth looking at. So thinking, because often they will come out with all sorts of things that you're not sure.
Another challenge as well, I would say, is overcoming that personal attachment to something negative. It's very easy to take some kind of, not necessarily take, I was trying to think of the word, but maybe it's not a personal attack when someone's saying no to you. They're just not in the right place for that job, or they just don't need the help in finding someone. And being able to deal with that and think it's not about me. They're not saying, off you go, thanks very much, matey. It's really just that they are fine, or they just don't need the support. And being able to just pick yourself up and move on from that and think, right, next person, who am I calling next?
Yeah, that's really good advice. It is. If you have a few of those in a row, it can hit you. It can sort of knock your confidence. But as you say, I mean, we did an interview recently, and we spoke to a Jack Player who is the head of recruitment at an organisation called Ambitious About Autism, and we were talking about talent pooling, and building relationships with candidates. And exactly as you've just said, it might be that just at this particular moment, the opportunity you're talking about isn't right, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't leave the door open. And we were talking about that from his point of view as head of an internal recruitment department, where they want to have long-term relationships with candidates, and because it might not be right now, but it could be right in 12 months or in 3 years. So I think it's trying to, if it's not right at the moment, it's trying to sort of get to the point where you've got that ongoing dialogue. And I guess with what you've done and working in that same industry, you've got a lot of candidates. You sort of
it's relationships, isn't it? It's all about relationship building. That's the job.
Definitely.
And the networking. And when I don't mean that in a sort of I'm just trying to think of the word again, and it's gone. Uh, it's gone. My word, it's gone. I'll come back to it. But I think, yeah, it very much is about building those long-standing relationships and
Yeah.
having that person that you've known over a period of years, and you've been on that career path with them. Maybe you put them into a role when they were a junior, and they, you've seen them move up the ladder to the point where they're then a hiring manager and they're coming to you for
Yes.
an opportunity. And the word that I was thinking of was, I wasn't thinking about it from a David Brent way of recruiting, the networking,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
building strong relationships, and nurturing and valuing those relationships as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's when you're a recruiter and then you're moving people more than once. So as you say, as they go through their career, you've become a sort of a trusted advisor then. And that's where it becomes really rewarding.
Yeah, and it's a partnership then as well.
Yeah.
It's not a transactional thing, and that's what I think is really important, to get away from that. We do end up with that stereotype, and of course that comes from somewhere where you do have people that are, like you say, they don't necessarily hold those values, or they have that sort of moral compass about things,
Yeah.
ethics. And for me, it very much is about building relationships on trust, on honesty, and having that integrity, and you're working as a partner, whether it's the client or the candidate. So
Yes. Okay. And for you, I guess it might be slightly different now that you're running your own agency. But what's a typical sort of day in the life? What would it have been in agency, and what is it now? You're running your own
day in the life, yeah. Well, I think we've always got that umbilical cord to the office, aka the mobile phone, and checking
Yeah.
emails. So first thing, I've been very good at being disciplined over the years, and setting up a power on and power down setting on my phone. So I'm not tempted to be looking at emails at 10 o'clock at night, or
So it just
getting.
turns off, does it?
It powers down at 9 and powers back on at 7. So
Oh, right. Excellent.
brilliant. Checking the emails, yeah, first thing in the morning, see what's coming through. And you like to think you have a plan for your day, but it doesn't always go according to plan.
Yeah.
So in theory, it's catching up with candidates in the morning. Maybe it's people I haven't spoken to before, having a conversation with them so that I know what I'm looking for in terms of their search. Obviously, doing a bit of headhunting for vacancies that I have that are live. And then the afternoon will be follow up on live roles, and getting in touch with clients, be it warm, cold, lukewarm. And that's generally my day, with maybe some candidate catch-ups towards the end of the afternoon. I roughly structure my day like that. Of course, you'll get a freelance brief in, and then suddenly everything's kind of out the window, and it's quick turnaround, and drop everything and just focus on that.
Yeah, and so I think it's a lot of it's about people, isn't it? It's having lots of conversations with lots of people, and sort of keeping those plates spinning, if you like, and moving things, pushing things along, and keeping them going, towards making a placement, I guess, or winning a new client. But yeah, I mean, it is unlike some other jobs. It is a very sort of social career. Talking to people a lot, building relationships, maintaining relationships, and that sort of thing. So I think So
I was just about to say, actually, a really good point there, because there's the pre-COVID recruitment process, and there's the what we're in now. And I think when I started working in recruitment, I knew I had X number of people that I needed to meet in a day, because there were various KPIs attached to any agency that you went to. So I always remember I had to meet at least 3 candidates during my day. And they would come up to the office, and we'd have our meeting rooms and chat through things there. And yeah, it was a sort of social thing, whether you were supporting at a networking event or working at a book. So I was in book publishing, so I would regularly go to the London Book Fair, which is a big event in the book publishers calendar. So that would be a way to meet clients. That would be a way to meet candidates, as well as various sort of careers fairs and things like that. I think things are a bit different at different agencies, and it obviously really does depend on the space that you're recruiting into. So working in publishing, working with planners and strategists, I would then attend a planning and strategy a group or a meetup that would happen every so often.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to within, I suppose, I'd say last 3 years, actually, because the role I had at my previous recruitment agency was completely remote. So I've been working remote before the COVID piece, and that would be a lot of meeting people online, lots of video meetups, and keeping in touch with clients and candidates that way. So it's interesting to see how things have changed and how people will communicate now. Of course, this is the best way, isn't it? On online Zooms and Teams and things like that.
Yes, and it would seem that, I mean, lots of companies are talking about either scaling down their office space or just eradicating it completely and having everyone work from home. I think my feeling is there'll probably be a balance, but I don't think a lot of companies are going to go back 5 days a week.
No.
People sort of commuting in and out of London or whatever city it might be. I think there will be an element of maybe 2 or 3 days at home, and then the other time in the office potentially.
And I value the face-to-face meeting, of course. There's nothing like sitting down and having a coffee with someone and really getting to know them, and that whole the non-verbal communication NLP piece that you get, that you don't have that necessary kind of replacement on video. I think you can still get a little bit of that, but it's not quite the same. So yeah, there's nothing quite like having a good old chat and meeting people, and the handshake, which isn't allowed anymore. It's a shame in a way, but we just have to find ways to do things.
Yeah, I think we've certainly lost that sort of human to human sort of contact, haven't we? And I think even when we're talking now, you're sort of looking into a camera, and or you're because you on my screen and the camera is in very slightly different places. So actually, you're right, that sort of eye to eye contact, which I guess we sort of just taken for granted, and we sort of grown up with that. And if this continues for a while, I think people will. It's a strange situation to be in, but hopefully we're going into another lockdown now, but hopefully sort of coming into the new year, things will start to improve.
Yeah, I think we have to make the best of what we have available, what mediums we have available. I don't know, however many years ago when video wasn't really the done thing, how people would have got, dealt with things then over the phone, I suppose. Everything a little bit more on the phone, which again is, you do miss that face to face. So we should feel quite lucky that we have this sort of technological capabilities that we have now. So
well, indeed, I mean, as a recruiter, I guess it means you can engage with more people in a day, because I was the same as you when I first started out. It was getting people into the office, and there were meeting rooms upstairs, and we book you have a meeting room and you take someone up there and you'd have a 15-20 minute initial chat to understand the opportunities they might be right for. And also, I never worked for this particular company, but I know there was a company that actually a friend of mine used to work for, and that was their business model was that it was everyone comes in, it's a quick fire 10-minute interview, and then they'll put 3 or 4 opportunities in front of you and try and get you to agree to be put forward. So it's a real sort of production line, if you like.
The chicken factory, as I like to call it.
Well, yeah. I mean, they had some. It was sales actually. They were in sales and marketing, but they had some really good opportunities. But you very much felt that sort of you were part. Yeah, it was sort of a real, yeah, as you say, chicken factory. Turning the handle and getting the candidates through. So I suppose that could still happen with video. But yeah, I guess if you were doing that, you could probably see more people in a day, but it's not quite the same as being face to face with someone, as you say. But I'm sure we'll sort of get through this period of time, and things will maybe not return exactly to the same. But I think, but in a positive way, that now everyone is used to sort of the video conferencing and having meetings online and that sort of thing. I think we'll all be delighted to go back into an office and have that face to face contact, but also it would be nice to have that balance as well, I think.
Knowing that that's an option and having the best of both worlds, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm the same as you. I've worked remotely for quite a while now, and I think there are big benefits to it. So it sounds ridiculous, but I could go downstairs and put the washing on or something. It's just little things like that you would probably miss if you were back in an office full time, or at the end of the day at 5 o'clock I can finish and my family's here and I can see my children and all that sort of thing. You can't do that when you're commuting, and then you don't get back till sort of 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. So yeah, I think people will have benefited in some ways from what's happened and won't want to go back to that sort of.
Yeah, there's a little bit more of the life balance.
Yeah.
But you do, I think, especially in recruitment, need to be aware of when there's a blend there. So it's very easy to be sat at your desk and look down and see that it's 7:30. Normally, of course, you're finishing work.
That's true, yeah.
You might, bit overtime, whatever you're doing, and then off you go, and you've got your hour or however long it takes you to get back. Well, you haven't got the commute time. It's interesting to see how people, do they just keep working during that period, or they call the fake commute, don't they now? So going out for your walk when you would have been traveling to work, and
okay.
So it's interesting.
That's interesting, yeah. Fake commute. Okay, that's good. That's good. And so with Wild Squirrel, what's your, just let's talk about that for a little while. What's your sort of focus, what the market and what you're trying to achieve there?
So being in planning and strategy, see, it's drawn to staying within that space. So for me, it's back with marketing and advertising agencies again. I'm working with planners and strategists at all levels. So I work with juniors that are a couple of years into the industry, all the way through to the heavyweight strategy directors that have led departments and built teams. And that's freelance, permanent, and contract as well. And I cover a broad area. So from a sort of traditional advertising agency all the way through to digital shops and brand activation spaces. So quite a range, really, with the plan that as I grow, I can then look at client-side roles as well.
Yes. Okay, I was listening to a podcast recently about, it was a marketing podcast, and the guy on there he was head of, well, he wasn't head of marketing because it was the Oatly is the company. So they make milk. Yeah. So it was really interesting. He said that when he first started there, which I think was 2012, he got rid of the whole marketing department, or as in name. And they're just creatives. There's sort of a central hub of creatives, and he credits that approach as to how it's the growth of Oatly, because Oatly's been around since the 90s apparently.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I didn't actually. I've seen it on the supermarket shelves, and he said you would have walked past it and not even known what it was. He said because it was very corporately sort of branded and everything. So I'll be interested in your opinion on that, in terms of, that's probably quite a radical thing to do. And it might be that it's more in name than actually, as in wiping out marketing completely. But his view is a sort of a central group of creatives can do the job and more of a traditional sort of marketing department. What's your view on that?
Oh, interesting, really. It's quite, like you say, it is a broad, very sort of bold move to wipe out creative. I mean, my understanding and my relationships are with planners and strategists. So it's interesting because I always think of those those people have to be creative, but they have to be strategic. They have to be able to switch on the left brain and the right brain.
Yeah.
So I think very interesting. I wonder how he decided what types of creatives he would have had. Would they be hybrid strategy people, creative people?
Yeah, I think from having listened to it, it probably is. It as I say, it was more maybe in name that, you know, it was like a
Right.
we've got rid of marketing and now we're just a group of creatives.
Yeah.
I think you have to have obviously all of those skills still there. But I think what his point was that they couldn't have got to where they've got to if they'd had a more of a traditional sort of marketing approach. And I think they've got a quite a sort of a fun, engaging brand. And I guess I think he was saying that that's really how that came about. Anyway, it's a bit of a tangent.
No, it's interesting.
But yeah, interesting. As I think it's.
I wonder if they used an agency to help them with that.
Yeah, I
with
don't
that
know.
rebrand of not just the low, you know, the identity, but also the structure of the business as well. So that's very interesting how that mirrors how advertising and marketing agency, let's say they're bold, you know, they want to do the best work they can for their clients, and you know, however that manifests itself through sort of these ways of doing things, i.e. encouraging their client to just start from scratch.
Yes, and I think what they have achieved is the brand is almost like a person in itself. It's got a character, and it's you know, it's a bit cheeky and all that sort of thing. And I guess nowadays brands have to have something a bit different about them because there's so much social media and there's so many channels and all that sort of thing. I think that they took that approach to stand out, I guess. And he said at the big, you know, when he sort of came in, that Oatly itself, or the concept of an oat milk, most people were like, "Oh, really? That sounds awful." But so yeah, he's built the brand around that. So thinking about recruitment as a career, so how would you? What advice would you give? I mean, you've got two hats really, because you can talk about recruitment as a career, so for people looking to move into recruitment, but also there's the sort of advertising side as well. Just, I mean, generally, if we look at recruitment first, what would your advice be to someone who's thinking, actually, your recruitment might be something I'm interested in? How would you think they should sort of go about moving into that space?
I would say, in all honesty, to look at some of the bigger recruitment agencies out there. Some of these, and the reason I suggest that is because they have fantastic programs that help people with no recruitment experience whatsoever get up and running. They teach them the foundations to being a good recruitment consultant. I'm not saying that you wouldn't necessarily get that at a small boutique place, but it's good to have that foundation to get you going, and then you do a year or two at insert large organization's name here and you could then think, well, I'm really interested in this area. And I think one of the key things is always think about an industry that you're quite passionate about. You want to be able to really buy into that and really be able to promote people with those skills and be very immersed in that industry as well. So don't go and pick something you think, oh, I'm going to make a load of cash in oil and gas. But have you really got any interest in what's going on in oil and gas?
Yeah.
So that's, you know, definitely a tip. And I think actually a really nice link back into Oatly is about brand storytelling and all about you as a consultant and your brand. You know, you mentioned Oatly being the character of sort of the cheeky chappy. Well, I think it's almost important to think about what is your USP. How are you going to be different from someone else in your space, another competitor? What sets you apart from them?
Yeah, that is very interesting. I think, and as we've spoken about before, when we first sort of got in contact, Career Propeller is, you know, the idea of that is that your candidates can come to the platform and get lots of hints and tips about how to approach the job seeking process. Sort of downloads and videos and courses and that sort of thing, such as the video that we're doing today. but the other side of it is for employers to tell their real story. So our sort of partner employers have a profile on there, and we create content basically for them, so that candidates, because I think if you go on one of the big job boards, or and there are aggregators and all sorts of things. So basically, there are thousands and thousands of jobs out there, is what I'm trying to say. And it's actually very difficult it's fairly easy to find job ads, very easy. But what you can't generally find is exactly what you've just said, is the story behind the brand, behind the company. And I think now there's been a bit of a shift in when I first sort of went into the workplace, it was still job for life to some extent, and it was about a good salary, a good pension, good benefits, and all that sort of thing. Probably for me, it was probably less about, well, what is this company about? What's their ethical stance on things and all that sort of thing. But I think now that's much more important. But companies haven't really caught up with that, so they're not really telling their authentic story. Now you can do that as a recruiter. And that's what you do, because you're going out into the marketplace and you do sell the company as well as the role itself, and that's part of your job. But if someone comes to a job ad cold, how do they get that? How can you get that across? Because it's quite difficult in a job ad. And actually, job ads, I think a lot of them are just lists of requirements that they have of the person. It doesn't really, it's not really a job advert. Because to me, an advert needs to sell. And it should be the company sort of saying, this is the job, but actually this is why you should come and work for us, because, we do this and we've won these awards and whatever it might be.
How do they cut through the noise of every other ad, and how do they stand out? And it's difficult because it's same old. It's easy to start the ads. We've all written so many job ads in our time, and I think you've got to be able to really make a point and get noticed. And I think that there is a little bit of a technique to that, and it's copywriting, isn't it? At the end of the day, that's what it is. So definitely. How can you write engaging copy to get your audience interested, and get them contacting you? And that's what it's about. And that's just, I think that's something you learn. Of course, one of the things I think about being in recruitment and over the years is the courses and things we go on and what we're taught to sort of keep improving. And then going back again to the advice on someone starting out, you learn a lot of that in these bigger recruitment agencies, these bigger recruitment companies. So that's a good piece of advice there.
And if we were to look at your market that you're in, so advertising, strategy and planning, I guess that I mean, when you think about advertising, you think about creative, don't you? Really, you think about
you don't think about planning and strategy.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get to. Sort of how, I mean, is there a typical career path for someone who's in strategy and planning? Would they, because I wouldn't necessarily have known a while back, that role even really existed.
Exactly. Now, when I wanted to get into advertising, I knew nothing about planning and strategy. I hadn't known it existed, and it is a relatively new discipline, not necessarily promoted. But I wanted to become a copywriter. I love watching all the TV ads and thought I'd love to do that. And my stint at JWT and Saatchi & Saatchi were little work placements to try and get in, and I knew nothing about planning and strategy then. And it's interesting, only from having set up this desk at this boutique agency 6 years ago did I have a clue about what the planners and strategists did. And their entrance into that space is very much on, be it ad agency network programs, graduate programs. They may come through research agencies like Kantar and places like that, where they start out as a researcher and then branch off into a planner or a strategist. Or they start out as an account exec in an ad agency, make the move into planning and strategy that way. So there are different avenues into that role, and it's a lot more known about now. I think you can do advertising degrees that cover all these areas. Certainly wasn't something available or known about when I was at university,
Yeah.
which wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I now my brain's sort of going towards technology, and I guess if you're talking about planning and strategy, there's got to be an element of using technology to help you with that. And then there's a conversation, I guess, about AI potentially coming down the road.
Yeah, there's the digital strategist and the transformation. Different types of planners and strategists do different things, whether a direct marketing person or a traditional brand planner or a digital strategist. And yeah, the likes of the programmatic advertising and things can play quite a big part in that job. But it's very much around being someone that uncovers key insights from research in order to develop a proposition that can then be passed to creative to create that big idea for that campaign and that brand. And that's essentially, in a nutshell, what a planner or a strategist does.
Okay, that's really interesting. So it's more, because I guess when you hear the word, strategy would be sort of upfront. Planning, in my mind, would be something that after the creative has been done, then that planning comes in. Is that correct, or is it all more before the?
Well, a planner it originally comes from account planner, and planners were born from strategic account people in ad agencies, traditional ad agencies. So it's comms planning, it's planning a campaign and the assets of what that campaign looks like and how that creative idea rolls out across all those touch points. So people think about planning as well as media planning, where will this message be placed, and of course that's another part of the job as well.
Yeah. Okay. And that sort of leads us quite nicely on to, I guess, if people were looking to, would now it's more sort of a well-known role, if you like, or an area. Would people come into the industry to do that specifically, or again, do you think the pathway is still to join, maybe doing something else and then move into it?
Yeah, they do, and I think that's where these internships come in. Or I see it's a very competitive and really quite hard area to get into. So a junior planner starting out has come in maybe just as a researcher or an insight person within an ad agency and worked their way up the ladder. There are different ways in. Of course, they might have even started out in creative and moved across to become a strategist. But generally, the sort of classic way is climbing the ladder from an insight and research and analytics role, working their way up the path. Yeah.
And sort of moving on to think about how people might go about finding a job. Say, for example, we've got obviously a lot of people, sort of young people who we know they've been very badly hit by what's happened in the last few months, but there have also been people who have unfortunately, you mentioned, been made redundant and might be looking for something else. So, and that comes back again. I'm quite big on networking. So one of the things we push on Career Propeller is to network, is to not be for want of a better phrase, a faceless CV. What's your view on both for recruitment and for advertising, the role of networking for candidates? As in, yes, they can talk to someone like yourself who is an expert and who has those contacts. But if people wanted to get in contact with companies directly, do you think that's a good way to go about it, so that they're a bit more of a known candidate? And how would you recommend people do that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's about, there's a large organisation that junior planners tend to join called the APG, and that's often a good way to access a network within that community. It's it's going to industry events, trying to get into industry events and network that way. It's as simple as reaching out to hiring managers and getting internships, applying for internships. That I always recommend to juniors that the internships is a really good way of doing things, because unfortunately junior planners have to have at least a couple of years under their belt before they're even looked at as a sort of junior planner. So you need to get in there and I always think find a way to just get your foot through the door, access the agency, access that environment, and then you're on the path, basically.
Yes, that's really good advice. And really, there's no sort of lower limit, is there? I mean, you could,
No.
you know, and I think, I mean, if it was me and someone, maybe someone who was still at school contacted me and said, I really want to learn, you know, I'll come in and do some hours, I'd be very impressed by that. I think not enough people do that. And it is definitely a way of, you know, getting your foot in the door, but also becoming known. And it's almost like it's a natural progression that you would end up maybe not working at that company, but if you're making those contacts and you're becoming known, then you've got such a much a better chance to sort of get into that area, rather than sort of waiting and thinking, oh well, I'll just send my CV in with everyone else. You know, unfortunately, that's you are literally just going to be one of any other number of people, I think. So that's
You've got to
really
cut through the noise, definitely. And
yeah.
LinkedIn applications and things, yes, you know, it'll be competitive to get one of 12 places in an ad agency graduate program, even an internship, even just work experience. Sometimes it's about writing a decent email, showing promise, and
Yeah,
just getting in touch with people direct and being bold and being brave.
I love that. Yeah, being bold and brave. Yeah, that's really good. And I think never giving up as well, because
Yeah,
again,
definitely.
it sort of brings us back to our conversation earlier on, which was about business development and getting knocked back, and not allowing that to affect you, because you know ultimately the more companies you contact, the more people will talk to you, and then some of those will eventually result in either an internship or a first job or whatever. So yeah, that's be bold and brave. Yes, I like that. That's good. In terms of, so we've only got a few minutes left, and so I just wanted to cover quickly about CVs.
Yeah.
What would be your sort of top tips around CV writing? Because I think CVs are still important. We know that for a lot of companies use software that would parse a CV, that would sort of look at keywords and that sort of thing. But there is still, I recommend a 2-page maximum for a CV, because as a recruiter, if someone had written a 15-page CV, you knew that they didn't think they were quite right, but they were trying to justify.
It's interesting you say that, because I would always say to someone, some people try and squish their CV all onto one page. I think that's bad. I often say if it rolls onto 2 or 3 pages, it's not, if you've got a very, very senior candidate who's been out there for 20 years plus and he's trying to cram everything into a couple of pages, I think it's really very much about what is on those pages, how it's laid out.
Definitely.
I always suggest bullet points personally. I think different CVs will be needed to be slightly adapted to the different industries people are applying for.
Yes.
What's right for an IT developer role isn't necessarily going to be the right CV for a planner strategist or any other role. So I think, generally broad consensus is really making sure that it's punchy, to the point. And yeah, those keywords are there, but not necessarily a shopping list of things. I think a very impactful profile summary written. Now, for me, I always think this should come in first person, very much about who you are, pretending you're in the lift with the CEO of a company you've always been dying to work for. What would you say to them, going from floors 1 to 3, for example, and make that your profile summary, just really clearly laid out, and good use of space, being to the point about what you've been doing at each job, but
Yes.
not not necessarily giving too much information, just enough to pitch you to get you an interview. That's what it should be.
Yes, that's good. And also, I think what you've alluded to as well is sort of tailoring for the opportunity you're going for. Because I think you could, as you say, if you've been in an industry for 20 years, you've done a lot of different things, and you can probably write a CV in lots of different ways, especially that sort of opening paragraph. So, when a company puts a job ad out there, or a job spec, they're sort of giving you their list of requirements, really.
Yeah.
So I think you need to make sure that your CV is addressing those. It could be that you've, even in the last sort of 6 to 12 months, you focused more on one area, but actually before that you had a lot of experience, and so you could write your CV tailored for different sort
Absolutely. I would always recommend whatever candidate, whether they're a junior, midway, or a senior, every job, tailor the CV.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, that is brilliant advice, and we're pretty much up to our time. So I just want to thank you so much for
Thank you for
taking the
having
time.
me.